Good to see you here. We're glad you're able to join us this morning. And today, as we said, we're dedicating the shir to Michael Aaron ben Matta Beryl and Michael Milner, whose mother is with us here, Linda Milner. We wish you long life after the tragic loss of your son last week. What we would like to do today is, as we are celebrating the Yom Tov, that is tomorrow, and on Wednesday, the New Year of Chassidus. The truth is, I lost my mind a little bit because I wanted to do this shir tomorrow. Today I was planning to do Parsha. Okay, this is the way it goes. We'll do this today, we'll do Parsha maybe tomorrow. Either way, it's good having you here with us. And let's talk about this concept, because people oftentimes wonder, what is a chassid, right? Is it somebody who wears a black hat and has a long peyot? Is that a chassid? Is it a person who's extra ultra-orthodox? What do they call it? Extreme fundamentalist, or any other terminology you want to use? Observing every Jewish law carefully. Perhaps a chassid is, I don't know, you tell me, what's your definition of a chassid? Maybe somebody who makes sure, Hanukkah's coming, we're going to bring a menorah to every single Jew who needs a menorah. Or Pesach is coming, we'll bring shmura matzah to a Jew halfway across the world. What is the definition of a chassid? Is it some kind of a mystic, with eyes trained to see the godliness inherent in all of reality? How do you define, what's the definition of somebody who is a chassid? That's the question that I figure many people are wondering. And since we discussed this last week, the concepts behind Chassidus, Chassidic movement started in the 18th century. Obviously, over time it's evolved and it's changed the lives of very many people. But what is Chassidism all about? And what is the idea? You look, the Chassidic way is to be enthusiastic and passionate. So is that part of it, which we discussed last week, that the Baal Shem Tov, who founded the Hasidic movement, and a major premise of it was boundless joy. And that's what I want to talk about, a little bit about that idea. Not just the joy element, but the philosophy behind it. And hopefully we could gain an understanding of its life-changing contribution to Judaism and the very practical relevance of the mystical teachings of Chassidus. Because after all, as we've discussed here many times, it is a philosophy. You take the very word Chabad. It's an acronym of three words: Chachma, Bina, Da'at, wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Now, I know those words all seem synonymous, but in mysticism, it's much deeper. On Shabbos and Shul, I gave a shir in the morning, and we discussed that. To me, the bottom line is Da'at, the third word, because Da'at is about implementation, about taking what we know, what we learn, and making it a real part of my life. That is the idea of Chassidus, about making it real, a part of my life, about how I live my life. That's the idea that Chassidus teaches us. What's the idea of studying if it's not something that is ingrained and engendered in the way I'm living? So as we're learning here today, in the memory of Michael Aaron ben Matta Beryl, and we think about whatever ideas, every day, hopefully, when you finish a shir, any shir you go to, whether it's my shir or any other shir, ask yourself, how has this changed my life? What have I gained from this today? What can I implement that will make me a better person, a better Jew, a better spouse, a better parent, a better child, a better human being? Now, there's many important days on our Jewish calendar. We all know, we celebrated the high holidays a couple of weeks ago, and Sukkot, the whole month of Tishrei, Hanukkah's next week, and Pesach in the month of Nisan. Not as many people know about this festival called Yud Tes Kislev. Yud Tes is the 19th of Kislev. It's tonight. And it's on this day that we celebrate the Hasidic New Year. The time of the year that we renew our commitment to these studies of the Hasidic philosophy. And of course, we want to understand what difference it makes and how it implements, how it affects our life. So, let me ask you this question before I even go further. Based on your personal experience, what would you say defines what a chassid is, or what a chassid should be, at least? Because, many people think if I'm a Litvak, and as we discussed last week, it was in Lithuania, in Vilna, where the major opposition to the Hasidic movement was happening. But as we know, the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, was himself a Litvak. And there were very many Hasidim in Vilna alone as well. So even though we learned that there was a major conflict and controversy of the Hasidic movement, and it was in Lithuania. So many of us being Lithuanian here, I'm personally not. I'm Russian and Polish. From my father's side, Russian, my mother's side, Polish. But regardless, somebody just shared their screen. I'm going to ask you to unshare your screen, please. Who's sharing their screen? Give me a second here. Let's see, your screen is being shared. If you could just unshare your screen, please. Whoever shared your screen, your name is iPhone. Please, there you go. Thank you. Because I want to share my screen, right? And I can't share your screen and my screen at the same time. In fact, let me share my screen with you guys so we could put up a little insight, a little ideas. Okay? We're going to start with the history of the Hasidic movement because we were discussing it last week. But my question before we go there is, what is it that a Hasid should be? Is it a person who follows a Rebbe? Okay, yes, in the Hasidic movement, it's common that people, they follow your Rebbe. Or is it somebody who does everything possible to help another person? Or maybe, as we discussed, an energetic, happy, and positive-minded person. Or somebody who engages in fervent prayer, one who's exceptionally religious. All those things maybe are part of it.
All combined, but
yes, those absolutely. Yeah, I'm just throwing out ideas.
Yeah,
all those qualities, like you're saying, Rosalind, can be considered part of the ideal that a Hasidic person ascribes to. Okay, and you could probably add lots more to that list, I'm sure. And I'm happy to hear if anyone wants to add anything, because my mind, I can't list everything that comes to my mind. But
caring and compassionate. Caring and compassionate.
100%, Benzi. Yes, I agree with you. And those are all part of the composition of what we should be aspiring to. But it's not that every chassid has succeeded in embodying all of these traits. Halavai, we were all caring and compassionate, and halavai, we were all caring and compassionate all the time. But
serving with joy. Serving Hashem with joy. Serving with joy and simcha. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all part of it. Now, if only we could all do that, but, just consider this. When we do see a chassid going far out of the way to help another person, or when you see a chassid who is, or a person who's enthusiastic and passionate and excited, okay, we assume, even without empirical evidence, that has something to do with their being a chassid. And when we see a chassid who exudes an extra measure of enthusiasm and joy, that it has something to do with the Hasidic way of life. There's some association between that genuine care, concern, kindness, happiness, enthusiasm, energy, positive-minded outlook on life, and all the other ideas that you could imagine, that you can mention, fervent engagement in prayer and devotion and meditation and contemplation. These are all characteristics of the Hasidic lifestyle. So who is the Hasid? Is it the one who's willing to fly to the ends of the earth to save a girl from drugs? Or to, many Hasidim have been involved in social welfare, right? To help somebody in a critical moment. or the person is full of life in a way that, is infectious and inspires the people around them. Yeah, I'm talking about positive infection, not not the one we require face masks for. Although, by the way, I must make note to everyone here, it seems that we have to be careful again. The numbers are rising in the community, and it's important for me to announce that we should be that much more scrupulous and careful. As a Hatzalah medic, I could tell you numbers are rising. And although we want to be open here in person already, we just have to be that much more careful and know that we're in a vulnerable situation. People are back with COVID. We don't want it. We don't want anybody getting seriously ill. So just be that much more careful. So on this note, perhaps the question we need to ask is not what is a chassid, but rather we should ask something a little bit deeper. What is it that Hasidism offers in terms of joyousness and prayer and religious observance and love of people? What lies at the core of the Hasidic teachings? What could I learn from the philosophy of Hasidus to improve my own life? Because obviously, as we've been discussing last week and today, the Baal Shem Tov wasn't just saying, everybody be happy, who wants happy drugs? This wasn't, let's get some LSD. Yeah, there was LSD. It stands for let's start davening. Okay? And all the other pot is put on tefillin. But it's something that's worth asking, because as we are here tonight going to celebrate the Rosh Hashanah of Hasidus, I think especially now, when the world seems more than ever in need of some radical change. If life wasn't exactly simple BCE, before the COVID era, then it certainly isn't now. With all kinds of new challenges and quirks in our collective plate, you think about everything going on. And as the numbers are ticking up again, and as unfortunately we're seeing that more people are sadly, we look at the situation happening in the world these days, and do I need to tell you what's going on? How many deaths I've seen, how many funerals I've been to just in the last week alone. It's not a good situation. We need something to change. And you look at the economy has entered a tailspin. The rand is starting to plummet again. And the toll this is all taking on human life. Okay? So as more people are going back into quarantine, I thought we were done. I hope we're not going to go into another lockdown. But I hope that's not the case. But as somebody said to me yesterday, it seems inevitable. Right? We had to rethink things as basic as what community means, as what role human interaction plays in life. It's not just the economy, the rand plummeting, the mental health crisis we're seeing now. Let me tell you the divorce rates that I have been exposed to in my rabbinic position. There's unfortunately a lot of problems on the rise, and we have to do something about it. Believe me, I'm not going to pretend that we could cure all these issues by going Hasidic, but as we've seen, some of the traits that are associated with the Hasidic teachings and lifestyle probably could add something positive to humanity and to our lives. And although I'm born into a Hasidic lifestyle, I know there's a lot more for me to learn. And that's why I think the more I learn, the more I have to teach. And as tomorrow we start the cycle of learning Tanya again. In the very introduction of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says, what you learn, teach to another. So what I learn, I'm teaching to you. It's the only way I'll absorb it and learn it and know it better. If we've ever thought, wow, going out of one's way to help another person brings such beauty into the world. And by the way, I want to make note, are we ever really going out of our way? Think of that. We think we're going out of our way to help somebody. But you know what the Hasidic teachings tell us? Nah, you're going on your way to help somebody. Nothing's out of the way. It's all part of the divine plan. Let me share with you a story that happened to me. last night on my way to a dinner. So unfortunately, there was a dinner that I was invited to attend. The dinner was called for 5:30 yesterday, and I couldn't be there at 5:30. I had prayers for the late Mickey Sasportas, who was a member of our community in Shul, at 6 p.m. So there's no way I'm going to get to the dinner at 5:30. Then I usually on Sunday evening spend the time with my kids at a beautiful communal event called Avos Sabanim, fathers learning with their children at Torah Academy. So I came a little early. I was there 5 o'clock to like 5:40, studied with my kids. Then went on to prayers. And on the way back after prayers, which probably ended maybe 6:30, 6:45, whatever time I finished, I'm driving. And I have a menorah on top of my car now because, we're spreading the light of Hanukkah. We need a lot more light in the world. And as I'm driving, it seems rickety, the car. I get out to look, seems fine. I'm passing by somebody else. I meet a neighbor of mine from New York who's here for their grandkids' bar mitzvah. The whole family's here. They see me, let's take a picture together. And they say, oh, by the way, you got a puncture in your tire. Then I get a phone call from a stranger who saw me looking out of my car, looking up at my menorah to see why it's rickety. And they said, yeah, you have a puncture in your tire. So I learned that, I got to puncture my tire. What do I do? And I have all my kids waiting for me at the school, waiting for me to fetch them. So I have to go get my kids still. Luckily, the neighbor from New York says, okay, we'll go get your kids. You go fix your tire. I pull into the Coltex garage. And as I pull in there, I ask them if they could help me. They say it's $50. They'll change the tire. No problem. Let's do it. They ask me for a spanner. I don't have a spanner in my car. I don't have any of the equipment. I should. But unfortunately, I didn't have it with me yesterday. So I asked, there's a capped car there. And for some reason, the cap usually has it, but the guy doesn't have it. Then a car pulls in. And it's a young man. And I ask him, he says, Shalom. I ask him if he's got spanner equipment to help fix my tire. He says, sure. He opens his car boot and all of his clothing falls out. And my kids are there already and they're helping him put everything back. We find the stuff. We try to fix the tire. But his whatever you call that thing, the spanner doesn't fit. And his jack is too small. And guess what? The guy contacts us. Okay, fine. He takes one off the shelf in the shop. So they had it there. And they continue to help me. In the meantime, I'm talking to this young man. His name is Gabby. Where are you from? So Gabby tells me, I wasn't planning on coming here. He's from Krugersdorp, and he usually goes to a different Caltex. He's visiting his family. And he says there was something divine that pulled him in. So I said, wow, that's amazing, because he came to help me, and he wasn't planning to be there. I said, we call that in Hebrew Hashgacha Pratis. I didn't know if he's Jewish or not. And if you know what Hashgacha Pratis, he goes, yes, this is Hashgacha Pratis. So when he says that, I say, oh, you're Jewish. He said, of course. I studied in yeshiva. And then we start talking about yeshiva, and he knew he studied in the yeshiva, which is right next to where the ruthless, senseless murder took place yesterday of Eli K., who was a member of our community here. And we know Eli K's parents. And Eli himself, I knew him when we used to be at Torah Academy, very, very sad, and we were talking about this terrorist attack, and he said he was at a yeshiva that was right there. And we were talking about this, and I asked him a surname, and Gabby tells me, he told me his surname. I said, oh, was your grandmother Faye? He says, yes. I said, oh, she used to come to our Chabad Seniors program. He says, my grandmother used to love it. She used to wake up 4 o'clock in the morning waiting for your bus to fetch her. You gave her a sense of meaning. And thank you for all the food you sent and for all the care and the counseling and the visits. It was just what I call hashgacha pratis. And as Gabby told me, this wasn't out of his way. This was on his way. This was on his way. Then I was at the dinner later at night. I got there like 3 hours late because of this. I was talking to the person sitting next to me, and he tells me another amazing Hashgacha Pratis story that happened to him. Hashgacha Pratis is a concept, an idea that the Baal Shem Tov taught, and tried to ingrain in us the idea that nothing is out of the way. Everything me Hashem mitzadeh gaver kananu. Every step of our life is part of God's plan. Nothing is out of our way. We think we're going out of way to help somebody, says the Baal Shem Tov. No, it's on your way to help somebody. If we think, if only I could have a little bit more enthusiasm and joy in my life now. That's certainly worth asking the question. What really is Hasidus all about? Why would it serve a common denominator for of a set of indefinite, these positive behaviors that we see here, these ideas that Hasidus teaches us, the Baal Shem Tov introduced these concepts that I know certainly positively influence my life, and I'm sure anybody who could learn from it, I think you could learn from this tremendously, how it could influence and positively impact anyone's life. I know how these ideas have impacted me and the way I see it, and I think everyone could learn these ideas. And so throughout the history of Hasidus, this question has been asked. It's been asked of Hasidim and of the Hasidic leaders, of the Rebbes themselves. There's so many stories in Hasidic lore of when various non-Hasidic people approach the Hasidic leaders to try to understand what it is that Hasidim has to offer. A mashpia. Mashpia is in Hasidus, there's a concept of a mentor, a Hasidic mentor. In Hasidus, this is a concept that's very important, that every person should have a mentor. In business, you want to have a mentor who could guide you in how to conduct your business in the right way, so you know that you are doing, learn from the mistakes of others, or learn from the experience or from the success of others. Hasidus emphasizes that you should have a mentor, mashpia. The Rebbe, for a few years before his passing, insisted and beseeched his Hasidim. He said, the Mishnah tells us, Aseh lecha rav, every person should have a mentor, a teacher. So in Hasidic circles, it's common that there are mentors who guide and inspire, especially the young. And they would repeat constantly. I would sit at a farbrengen, a gathering, where the Hasidic, the mashpia, the mentor, would repeat various anecdotes of Hasidim who pressed their Rebbe for a deeper understanding of the framework in which they held forth their teachings and customs. Because if we had Judaism for thousands of years, why did we need this new movement that the Baal Shem Tov started? But as we discussed, there were many times that certain Hasidic Rebbes were questioned by Jews and non-Jews about their beliefs. When the Alter Rebbe was incarcerated, and tonight is the anniversary of his emancipation, his liberation from jail, he was met by the highest ministers, and if I'm not mistaken, maybe even the Tsar himself. And, of course, they exonerated him. They realized it was baseless, the allegations against him. But they also came to appreciate the significance of the Hasidic movement. And let me share with you one such story. So put it into the slide. Let me just put one of these stories on here. And just to go back a little bit in the history for a moment. So here, just the 18th of Elul in 1698 is when the Baal Shem Tov was born. We discussed that last week. And we're so far discussing what defines a Chassid and what we could learn from Hasidism. Okay, so here's the story I'm going to tell you. And here are the two protagonists of the story. This story there's quite a famous story. It took place in the year 1843 in Russia, when the Tsar's Ministry of Jewish Affairs, they convened a special rabbinic conference. They made a very important conference for the purpose. They wanted to institute various reforms for Jewish life in Russia. And unfortunately, these conferences were not really concerned so much with the physical safety or the economic welfare of the Jews under the Tsar's, what would you call it, his jurisdiction. Because, the Tsar had various countries that were under Russia's rule. But their aim was more to try and impose more of the Russian way of life on the Jewish community by mixing into Jewish internal affairs, by trying to get Jews to assimilate more into Russian society. And it was a very unfortunate reform that the government proposed at this particular conference that was to outlaw the very movement the very teachings of the Hasidic movement. Now, why would the authorities want to do such a thing? Were they suddenly concerned with Jewish theology so as to try to promote one stream of Judaism over another? That wasn't the case. Their goal was much more political than that. It was to try and frame the leader of Chabad at the time, the Tzemach Tzedek, you can see right around the right, the third Rebbe of Lubavitch, the grandson of the Alter Rebbe, whose liberation we celebrate tonight. And by banning the teachings and way of life that he stood for, the government knew that he would have no choice but to stand up and to oppose their efforts as vocally as possible. And in the course of doing so, he would be expected to say something that might be used against him as proof of some kind of revolutionary activity, God forbid. So, in addition to the Tzemach Tzedek, there were three other Jewish leaders representing the various other factions of the Jewish community who were also present at this conference, this meeting. If I recall correctly, there was Rabbi Yitzchak Volozhin. He was the son of Rav Chaim Volozhin, very famous Lithuanian Misnagdic rabbi, but he was the one who made peace with Hasidim at his stage. And then there was, I think, two businessmen. One was Mr. Yisrael Halpern of Barditchev, who was a very illustrious and affluent person. And there was also a member of the Maskilim, the Jewish Enlightenment. His name was Bezalel Stern from Odessa. And he was also present at this meeting. So there were four leaders of the community. Two were rabbis, Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch and Tzemach Tzedek, Rabbi Yitzchak of Volozhin, who was representing the Misnagdik, the opposition of, again, ultra-Orthodox Jewry. And there were these two businessmen, Yisrael Halpern of Barditchev, who was an affluent businessman, and there was a representative of the Jewish Enlightenment, which they weren't even religious, Mr. Stern. And they were all invited to participate in this conference. Not, usually you come to a conference, you would think that you're given an opportunity to speak, to represent your case. But this really was imposing upon them what the Russian government felt was in the best interest of the Jewish community. Without, I'm reminded, I just had this discussion with somebody the other day. A lady called me up. She wants to know which retirement facility to put her mother into. And she was giving me the three options, what she thought was best. And I said to her, something? Why don't you ask your mother which option she wants? Because it's very nice for me and you to decide where your mother should move to. And we could discuss the pros and cons, the advantages and disadvantages of one place over another. But don't you think your mother, who is compos mentis, who has a mind of her own, don't you think she should be part of that decision making? Where did I get this idea from? Because I heard a story of I think it was Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Somebody came to him asking about two options of schools to send their child to. And Rabbi Auerbach said to the parents, he said, did you ask your child which school they want to go to? Why are you asking me? I mean, it's very nice to ask the rabbi, but ask the child. I mean, of course, parents have certain criteria and aspects of which school they want to choose for their child. And there's no doubt that the children, that this lady was calling in good faith to me and asking which old age home or which retirement facility to put her mother into, but ask the child. And in this case, in this instance, in this story, it doesn't seem like the Russian government was really asking the rabbis. They were sort of imposing it upon the rabbis. And this conference, it lasted from the beginning of May in 1843 all the way till the end of August that year. So just think about it. May, June, July, August. A 4-month conference in St. Petersburg. And this is where they were going to impose and present their ideas, their ideals. In the preceding months, government investigators were repeatedly sent to the town of Lubavitch to surveil the Rebbe and his activities. And these developments caused the Rebbe tremendous heartache, even making him physically ill, literally. Yet, when he arrived at the conference in St. Petersburg, he was the one who stood most confident, steadfastly, most vocally against the proposed reforms. And indeed, his bold statements caused them to be penalized some 22 times over the course of the proceedings. And each time, he was sentenced to a few days of house arrest, after which the meetings would continue. And after a tremendous storm raised by the Jewish world, the conference finally came to a most remarkable close with the Minister of Education, Sergei Uvarov. You can see him here in the picture. He was the leader of the government's anti-Jewish efforts. And he withdrew all of his proposals. He was the one trying to impose these new rules against the Jewish community. And he withdrew everything. And the Rebbe himself was awarded the prestigious title of hereditary honorable citizen. It's a significant honor of the Tsar's royal government. And in fact, if you go to St. Petersburg till this very day, you will see a statue, what do they call them? A bust of the Alter Rebbe. And you'll see that it's documented that the Schneerson family is a royal family, hereditary honorable citizens of Russia. And that's quite impressive that they were given this honorary title. It's a tremendous, significant honor. So it was in this context of this tumultuous conference that the Tzemach Tzedek was asked by the government. And here's the question that he was asked that I want to present to you. He says, Judaism has been around for 3,000 years. For generations, millions of Jews managed to study Torah and adhere to the Torah and its mitzvahs. So what then has been the contribution of the Hasidic movement? And it's this question that I would like to discuss. Now, let's go for another 15-20 minutes today. And tomorrow we'll bring a little bit more about this and to hear the Rebbe's answer. And hopefully it will give us some insight of what this is all about. And to properly understand what Hasidism is all about, we first have to understand the foundation upon which its teachings stand. The part of Torah study called Kabbalah. Now, yes, I introduced it last week. We talked a little bit about it. Kabbalah is the mystical component, or the concealed component of the Torah. Whereas the various components of the revealed Torah, okay, that's called Nigla. Nigla, you have Tanakh, right? The Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim. You have Medrash. You have the Mishnah. You have the Talmud. You have Halacha. That deals primarily with how to believe and live as a Jew. Kabbalah goes much deeper. It explores such abstract ideas as the process of divine creation. It's deep, it's mystical. The spiritual DNA that lies behind all physical matter. The study of Kabbalah enlightens us. It gives us an understanding as to what God is, what the soul is. Kabbalah, the teachings of Kabbalah, which is Hasidus, is based on the mysticism, but it's in a very palpable way. Because if you study Kabbalah, it's very, very mystical. Hasidus could also be mystical, but Hasidus is with a very practical, relevant application to life. Kabbalah goes very, very, very deep. And it's quite abstract, understanding the process of divine creation, understanding the spiritual DNA of everything physical. That's deep stuff. So when we study Kabbalah and we have a deeper understanding of what God is and what a soul is, and we explore how and why the world was created to begin with, and what exactly is our purpose in this world. For as long as we are here, we're indispensable to the divine plan. We have to remember we have a mission to achieve, to accomplish. As long as we're here, we have lots to do. And because its teachings are so deep, sublime, and you could say even abstract, the Kabbalah remained out of public sight for centuries. It was never published in writing or taught to the masses. I mean, it was published, but it wasn't something that was studied by the masses. Because its sublime teachings require the utmost attention and personal guidance if you want to properly understand it. That's why they say you can only study it at 40. Why 40? Because at 40, it says in the Mishnah, Ben Arbaim Labina, at 40 we finally have some wisdom. The other day I was at a birthday party, and the guy turned 60. It was actually yesterday. What am I thinking? Yesterday was a birthday party. 60 birthday. You know how much we get to squeeze in a day? I was telling you earlier about, in the morning I had 2 unveilings and a funeral. We had shul in the morning. We had shul, 2 unveilings and a funeral. I'm just giving you a little bit of taste of my day. And I was getting there through 94.7. And then getting home, stopping off at Great Park Shul for a meeting and collecting something. Getting to my house, seeing my family for a little bit. Going to a 60th birthday. Taking my kids out to ice cream, and then to Avos Abanim, and then to all the other things I mentioned. The punctured tire, a Shiva house, prayers, punctured tire, and then ending the day at a dinner, getting home at about midnight. So it's exciting. It's a good, great Sunday for a rabbi. Just to give you a little taste of my day. So at the 60th birthday, this guy says he's a little bit afraid, because it says in the Mishnah, Ben Shishim Lezikna, that at 60 one starts to get old. So I asked him if at 40 he got wise. He said no, he doesn't think he got wise at 40. I said, then don't worry about being old at 60. Anyways, I hope he didn't take offense to that. So, because the teachings of Kabbalah are so deep, so it was never promulgated. It wasn't something that everybody studied. It wasn't something that was shared with the masses. Because because it's so sublime and abstract, it could so easily be misunderstood and misconstrued. It could cause more harm than good. And we wouldn't want that to happen. So from the times all the way going back to Moshe, those secrets of the Torah were always taught quietly, and only by the most qualified teachers to the most spiritually sensitive students. Let me share with you what Rambam says about that. Rambam, Maimonides, taught about Kabbalah. He says, let's just give you a little, you have the written Torah and the oral Torah, right? So the written Torah is, we talk about the actual Torah itself, Tanakh, and then you have the oral Torah, which is the Masoret, the tradition, and the Midrash, and the Mishnah, and the Gemara, and the Talmud, and then we went into Jewish mysticism. That's Torah's HaSod, the secret Torah. And this study was limited to a small group of virtuous individuals. And literally, Kabbalah means received. Okay, so study of Kabbalah was limited to those who were at a level who could truly comprehend, who studied enough that now they're ready to go into the deep mystical secrets. We're going to look at these words from Rambam. Rambam says that the secrets of Torah were transmitted by small groups of elite scholars and to small groups of elite scholars. As the sages have said, the secrets of the Torah may only be transmitted to a person of counsel, a skillful craftsman, one who understands secrets, etc. These are the words that the Gemara says in Chagiga. To a yoetz chacham charashim, only to a wise, skilled person. And he says, only small snippets and allusions to them appear in the Talmud and Medrash, like a few kernels contained in a great many shells. What occupied with the shells, people don't even know what kernels lie beneath them. That's Rambam's words. So the point Rambam's saying, at the end of the day, you could learn how to live a robust, good Jewish life without ever studying Kabbalah. In the Tanakh, open a Chumash. In the Torah, in the prophets, in the scriptures, in the Mishnah, in the Talmud, in the Medrash, all these works, you will find so much. Open a book of Halacha. You can learn exactly what to do to live a fully Jewish life. And you don't need to delve into the mystical side. It's quite easy to understand why for most of our history, the vast majority of Jews have never studied, talked about, or were even necessarily aware of these deep mystical teachings of Torah, of Kabbalah. Today, of course, it's vogue, and Madonna studies Kabbalah. But it was only, in the 13th century, that a foundational Kabbalistic work called the Zohar was published for the very first time in Spain. And according to tradition, the Zohar, which was authored by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, one of the most frequently mentioned sages in the Mishnah and the Talmud, a student of Rabbi Akiva. That goes back 18 centuries ago. Rabbi Shimon has always been recognized for his greatness, for his mastery of Jewish law. But he was also the authority in his time on the teachings and the transmission of Kabbalah, which he wrote sometime in the 2nd century. But it took all the way till the 13th century for those teachings to become more renowned. And even then, it wasn't widely studied. It didn't permeate all of Jewish life. It wasn't something that everybody studied mysticism. Eventually, in the 15th century, that's when Kabbalah, mysticism, really started to be more renowned and more taught and more I guess, what's the word for it? Promoted, taught is a better word for that. Okay, so what I would like to do is, I have to go to another Shiva now, unfortunately. So tomorrow, please God, we will resume. We'll talk tomorrow about the Arizal. I have a video I want to show you. We'll watch the video, give you a little bit of the background of the history a little bit, and then we'll go into understanding how the teachings of Kabbalah, which last week I showed you that Baal Shem Tov promulgated those teachings, and we'll get more into that, and we'll go all the way to today. We'll hopefully cover it all and understand what the significance of this special holiday, Yud Tes Kislev, which we celebrate tomorrow, is all about. So please God, tomorrow, hopefully no reason not to start on time. From my perspective, I'm ready to start on time, but you never know what comes up. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all tomorrow. I wish you all a good Yom Tov, a wonderful day. Literally, Yud Yom Tov means a good day, right? And we'll discuss this tomorrow, please God. Looking forward to seeing you. Stay healthy and well. I think if anyone wants to watch the funeral for Eli K., a boy from our community who was senselessly murdered yesterday in Jerusalem, then I will send out a WhatsApp just now with the details for the funeral, which will be at 12:30. Stay well, everybody. Sei gesund, and see you tomorrow.